general manager of the Golden State Warriors.
Desire to come back and coaching the Warriors. It's a great thing, coaching Steph Curry, all those things. But there was another layer of desire to get this thing right. And I think sensing that was something Joe and I felt amazing about. And I think it starts with, just tighten things up a little bit. Talked about the turnovers, but the possession game, all those little things you can control on a nightly basis. And I think we've started to do a lot of those things, but we just have to take it to a different level. And I think Steve's, that was, we're both in agreement on that. That was something he pushed pretty hard. And I think, we're capable of it. We can do it. And we just got to focus on it.
Mike, watching these playoffs, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, very athletic teams. How much of a priority is it to add athleticism to this roster?
Yeah, I think the top priority is to take care of the ball, limit turnovers. And then after that, we'll try and get better in every which way. We took the most threes in the league last year, so definitely want to have as many guys as we can that can make shots. Athleticism helps for sure. I mean, having two wings like Jimmy and Moses, they're not going to be out. That will be out to start the season. That's a huge hole. And generally your most athletic position. So, yeah, I mean, we'll always look to add athletically, length, size, skill, all those things. But, yeah, I mean, watching the playoffs, you learn a lot. You see these teams where they're at, where you need to go, and it's good to see.
Mike, you obviously saw what happened to the season after Jimmy went down. Not having Jimmy, not having Moses to start the season, do you have the pieces internally to get those holes, or do you think that you need to go outside to improve those specific parts of the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got some pieces internally, but if you're looking at our roster in terms of who's back under contract, we don't have a lot of guys, especially if you factor in Moses and Jimmy not being ready to start the season. There's only a handful of guys under contract. So we're going to have to do some stuff, whether it's retain some of the free agents that we have, bring in some new players. But the general core of guys, though, I think is very solid, and we'll look to add to it.
How much do you expect? I mean, you mentioned the turnovers a few times. Do you expect, with internal improvement, a different style of play next year, potentially?
You know what? We can play however we want. Just don't turn the ball over. I really don't care. I think Steve would probably say the same thing. But I think it's more of, your bottom five in the league and turn the ball over. I don't think we can get to the top five in the league. That's a huge jump. I don't want to overset expectations, but if we can get the top half of the league turning the ball over on the offensive end, we do so many other good things. We get good shots. I think we're about the right things. We do a decent job on the offensive glass, but if we can take care of the ball, offensively, we'll be in pretty good shape.
You mentioned the 11th pick, pretty good chip to have in terms of improving the roster. How do you see you guys exploring using that piece, and do you like the optionality you have with that pick?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lottery pick, and I think in a strong draft, we feel like we can get a good player. So we'll look at it that way. But we'll look at everything. If there's offers for the pick to move up, move back, trade for a veteran player that could help us, I mean, we'll definitely look at all that stuff. But it's early in the process right now, and just got through with the combine, and so going through that stuff, starting to evaluate the prospects. But we feel pretty good about 11. Had some good success there before.
Do you expect to go big fish hunting in the trade market? And along those lines, how do you view the futures of both Draymond with his option and Jimmy with the last year of his deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as trade acquisition stuff, I mean, we're probably always in the conversation, frankly, because we have the draft capital to be. So we'll always look at stuff, whatever we can do to make the team better that makes sense, kind of now and in the future. I mean, as far as those guys, Jimmy and Draymond's got a player option. So ball's in his court in terms of returning. But, I mean, I think we've had the discussions where we want him to finish his career Warrior. He kind of feels the same way. So I would expect him to be back, but, it's his call on that. And then Jimmy, yeah, his surgery went well, rehab going well. I'm excited to get him back whenever we can, as safely as possible.
Mike, can you sort of describe your emotions and feelings as this played out with Steve? And because it sounds like he's been pretty honest about it. He felt like he was leaving at some point, and the Phoenix press conference, certainly we felt like it looked like he was leaning that way. What was that like for you?
I did not talk to Steve about it all year. Didn't ask him one time what he thought he was going to do. I thought it was just right to approach the season, get through the season the right way. He's got a lot on his plate, so didn't bring it up to him one time. But then when the season ended, took a little break, and then we got together and met a couple times with Joe. And, if I'm being honest, there was plenty of nights I went to bed, and I think Steve would say the same thing, where I thought he probably wouldn't be back as coach. But as things unfolded and we talked more and got through it, it became clear as long as he wanted to do it, it made a ton of sense for him to be back. And I think he really felt it, is excited about it, and I think we came to a really good decision.
Mike, the standard is the standard around here because of what you guys built for so many years. Do you think because of the uncertainty with the roster and Jimmy and Moses and whatever else you guys decide to do this summer that a championship next year is a realistic expectation still?
I think it's similar to last season going into the year, where you can evaluate the rosters around the league and say, look, that team's probably not the favorite. But for us to get through the season and put ourselves in the conversation. I thought the year before we somewhat did that by acquiring Jimmy, and then we get into the series against Minnesota, Steph goes down, and you have stuff like that you can't overcome. This year, we just never saw what we could be. Between the injuries, just the subpar play, we didn't do that. I think some of that stuff is correctable. We're obviously behind the 8 ball with no Moses and Jimmy early, so it's more about starting the season with, we got to get through a certain point of the year. Like, we need to hold it together here for a little bit. Let's see where we go when the trade deadline comes around and into the spring. I think the last couple of years we can say we've added talent in a good way in February, and who knows where we'll be come April, March, May. So I think it's kind of hard to say at the beginning of the season with these guys, not knowing. First of all, I don't know the team right now, and then I know those 2 guys are going to be out. So it's really hard. I think we got to build this thing in steps next year. But by the end of the year, if you have Steph Curry on your team, Steve Kerr's the coach, Jimmy Butler's back, like in a 7-game playoff series, I don't want to say we can't beat anybody.
With Jimmy and Moses, do you have an at-all updated timeline on their recovery as they progress in their rehab?
No, we don't. I mean, even now, it's hard to specifically say day, week, month they'll be back. I know they won't be ready for training camp. They won't be ready for the regular season start, but we'll see how it goes. A lot of it depends on the steps they make over the next weeks and months.
And then in the draft, if you are selecting at 11 or otherwise, how much will you value and prioritize a prospect who's ready to contribute right away versus someone who might take a little bit longer to develop?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be a temptation to feel like, let's try and draft somebody that can step in and play right away. It's just so hard in the draft to be able to project that. Even the last year's draft, the Duke kid from Charlotte, who would have thought he'd be able to come in right away and play so well? So I think you get caught up a little bit. You get in some trouble doing that. We'll just draft who we think is going to be the best player for us, for our franchise moving forward. That's kind of what we've always done. And, particularly the last few years, been pretty good about it, whether it's mid-first, second round, whatever. We're a little bit higher this year, but we'll take the same approach.
Mike, it's a 2-year deal with Steve. You mentioned he's back for this year and hopefully beyond that. Is that, I know nothing is ever for sure, but was it important to you guys to hear from Steve that he would make a 2-year commitment, even though obviously he could maybe not, but do you have that from him?
Yeah, I think so. I just want to leave it open to the fact of he considered it this year and at his age and however many years he's done it. I mean, it's his call, but we fully expect him to be here at least 2 years and perhaps more. I mean, hopefully more, I would say, in the sense of he's really focused right now, and you'll hear from him about getting this thing right. And it's not just a 1-year swan song, last dance type thing like, hey, let's ride off in the sunset. That is 100% not what this is about. Steve will tell it to you. I'll say it. Joe would not have been good with that. Nobody wants to do that. We got to get this thing right. And, we need a multi-year commitment, and Steve unequivocally gave us that.
And at all, would you term some of this, did you guys have to convince him to come back? Was that any part of this, or was it something different than that?
I think we all had to put our chips on the table and figure out what was right. And I think we had to convince one another of what we need to do to get. And some of that was what it looks like with Steve as a coach. And that's him sharing it and us asking questions. And so it was a great way to make a decision. I don't think it can be done in a lot of areas, but because of Steve and what he's accomplished here and the equity he has in the franchise, we could do it. But it was a very open and honest conversation. Steve made points to why, it wouldn't make sense for him to be back, which were great. And then we made points for why it made sense for him to be back. And those conversations happened over the course of a couple weeks, multiple meetings, and again, I think we came to the right spot.
You're listening to Warriors General Manager Mike Dunleavy addressing the Bay Area media at Chase Center.
You were unsure if he was going to come back. Was there a moment or a conversation, a specific one that you said, okay, I think we're going to get it done and he's going to come back?
Yeah, I mean, I think it went both ways. Because look, if you can be honest about it, there's good arguments for him to be back, and there's good arguments for maybe to move on and on his own personal reasons in life, just to move on and do something else. So saw both sides of it, and that's where we just needed to take the time and get through it, and ask the right questions, talk about the right stuff, talk about where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going, and again, figure out what's right for the franchise.
Mike, have you developed any sense of what's going to happen with Porzingis and Al?
Yeah, I mean, those are guys that we definitely would love to have back. They had some really good performances for this year with us. They add an element to our team that, we haven't had in the past. Al specifically with his size, his shooting, his leadership. KP is just a unique player, both ends of the court. And so I think for us to have that talent back is something we want. And so those guys, Al's got an option. I think, frankly, his option is twofold. One, do you want to keep playing? And two, do you want to be back with the Warriors? And then KP is unrestricted. So, we'll start having the conversations to try and get him back in the fold. But we like what we've seen from him. I think next year could be a more healthy, productive year for him.
And when you look beyond the aging core, meaning Steph, Jimmy, Draymond, what are the sources of optimism about the rest of the roster that you seem to have going into next season?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got some good young players. Whether it's Brandon, it's Moses, it's Guy. We've added some guys in the second round, and then we have the 11th pick this year and multiple picks in the future. So, I think we're in good shape in that regard. We've got good players on good contracts, and I think a big part of it will be Moses getting back and getting healthy. That was a tough one for us, but overall, I think relatively speaking, we're in pretty good shape.
Mike, over here. Brandon is eligible for an extension this summer. Is re-signing him or signing him to an extension a priority for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great. We've been through it before with restricted free agents, so we know how it goes. I think it's one of those situations where you want a player back, it's got to work for you and them, and hopefully we can come to a contract agreement before the start of next season. And if not, have no doubt that we'll go into the season and play it out and work it out that way.
Mike, as you said earlier, you don't want it to be a one-year last dance scenario. And Steve's also said a few times they want to end this thing the right way, I think is the way he puts it, with Steph and Draymond. Seems like kind of a unique balancing act where you're kind of honoring, respecting everything Steve and Steph and Draymond have achieved, and obviously trying to take those young players and figure out a way, as you said, to get it right. How do you, in your mind, sort of balance the unique spot you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news on that as these guys age is they're still playing at a high level. So it's going to end, to be clear, it's going to end for them whenever it does in the next few years. It's not going to end for us. The Warriors are going to go on forever, and we've got to keep pushing ahead. But for those guys, yeah, I mean, I see where Steve's talking about from his end, those guys end like they want it to end in whatever way they do. We want that to happen, and they make it easier on us by continuing to play well. And so that's been fun to watch, and we feel good about having those guys back. Well, again, those are the guys that are quote unquote ending, so I'd leave it to them of how they want it to be. I do know that, happy endings are always tough. And so, but I don't want to get carried away with what that looks like. Hopefully a few years from now, hopefully it's not the end of this season, but we're at this stage of the game where, it could be at any point. And so, I really haven't given a lot of consideration to that. I think that's probably more things for them, but for us, is to keep this thing going.
You were just at the combine. You have the 11th pick, as you said. How good do you think that part of the draft is, and with that pick, do you want them to be able to come in and get a lot of opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very strong draft. It's been talked about. You saw a third of the league this year tanking to get to the top, so that speaks for itself. But I think there's a good amount of depth, at least through the first half of the first round, which is where we fall. So again, I'm confident we can get a good player. And hopefully that player will have opportunity next year to perform, produce, help us. I mean, given the state of the injuries of Jimmy and Moses, my guess is they're going to have more of an opportunity than maybe in another year. So that'll be there. But then again, the most important thing is just kind of the long-term development. So make sure we get that right.
Mike, last year was kind of a unique offseason where things were kind of drawn out. Obviously, players didn't sign until start of training camp. How important is it for you to have your team set way earlier than that and have everybody in the building ready to go compared to last year?
Well, for my personal summer vacation plans, it's very important. I don't want to, I hope I don't have to be dealing with roster construction to the end of September. But that was a unique situation. My guess is it probably won't happen again in that regard. So, we got some things to figure out, though. Drafts, and then obviously Draymond's got his player option, and we've got some unrestricted free agents that we'd like to get back. So, busy summer as always, and hopefully it ends up being a little bit shorter than last year.
Steph's talked about his knee not being the same. It's a new normal after that knee thing he had this last season. How much does that affect the roster construction this summer, mitigating the knee issues?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to understand that as best as I could. I think it's important to consider. And my understanding is we expect him to have a year next year where that knees will manage it, but it's not something we're worried about. At his age, given what's happened, you have to think that way. But it's not something I probably need to think more about his actual age than I do the knee. I guess that's the way I'm thinking about it.
Another Steph question. He said he is interested in talking about an extension. He's eligible for an extension, obviously. Would you be pretty sure that you're going to be offering him an extension this offseason?
Yeah, that day will come. But I think, we've always stated we want Steph to finish his career here, be here for as long as he wants. And so I'm sure those conversations will happen, and you can predict where they'll be going. But yeah, I don't see under any scenario where we don't want to figure out a way to have him finish here. All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.